Today on Timescast, Japanese officials recommend a wider evacuation area around the troubled Daiichi nuclear power plant. Meanwhile, the governor of Tokyo tries to calm residents' concerns about contaminated water.
信じてないというよりは、なかなか十分な情報が得られないというふうに思っています。
And Eric Lichtblau answers reader questions about his story on the U.S. nuclear industry lobby.
A Japanese nuclear safety regulator expressed concern today that there might be some kind of a breach in Reactor 3.
現在この3号機の原子炉についても、燃料がある程度既存されているということが。
Three workers suffered severe radiation burns. Two of them actually were hospitalized when they walked through contaminated water adjacent to Reactor 3. There are particularly worries about Reactor number 3 because that's the only reactor there that's loaded with mixed oxides. That is, it's not just uranium inside, it's also plutonium. The Japanese are also widening the evacuation zone now around the troubled nuclear power plant. Before, they evacuated people out to a radius of 12 miles, and then between 12 and 19 miles away from the power plant, they told them to stay indoors but not necessarily leave the area. Now, they're telling people that they should be evacuating as well. There was a piece of good news today. Radioactive iodine in the tap water in Tokyo continues to decline for a second day, after spiking on Wednesday to a level that was unsafe, at least for infants to drink.
あんまりみんなヒステリックにならないでね。水道はちゃんと飲めますから。うちの奥さんも勘違いしてね、ペットボトル買いに行ったけどさ、ちゃんと飲めるんだから。あんまり乾杯する気分にならないけどな。こういう時期だし。
It has now been 2 full weeks that the brave technicians at the nuclear power plant have been trying to bring the reactors under control. They've made some progress. They now have electricity to all 6 reactors, so the worries of a meltdown seem to have declined. But there is still a real problem in that a lot of radioactive contamination continues to leak out of these buildings, and it's not clear how far it'll blow and in what concentrations.
直に言われたことっていうのは食材に関してはないんですね。
This is Mac William Bishop reporting for the New York Times from Tokyo. Some locals here are calling the reaction to reports and fears about radiation nuclear shock. Kanoko Ue runs a bentoya, or lunchbox shop, in central Tokyo. She said business has been quiet since the government said it had found increased levels of radiation in local water supplies and in certain vegetables.
世間話として怖いねっていうことはよくするんですけど、昨日もほうれん草のおひたしみたいのを出したけど、そんなに出ないこともありませんでしたし。
A lot of people here are concerned that they are not getting the real story from the Japanese government.
信じてないというよりは、なかなか十分な情報が得られないというふうに思っています。嘘だとは思いませんけど、十分な情報ではないと思っています。
On Friday, the government said it was encouraging people living 12 to 19 miles from the plant to evacuate the area. Sachiko Okamura said that she and her husband are staying with friends in Tokyo after deciding to leave their home, 65 miles from the plant.
この問題があって初めてすごく深刻に考えましたけど、それまでの間は日本は資源もないし、で技術的にその技術者の方を信じて原発は安心じゃないかなっていうふうに思っていましたけど、これからは考えていかなきゃいけませんね。
今の生活を維持するためには必要だと思います。というのも 30% が原発から来るエネルギーですので、生活レベルを落とさなければということを選択するのであれば、それは必要なものだと思っています。
And in Friday's Times, Eric Lichtblau reports on the lobby fighting to keep nuclear power on the U.S. energy agenda. On Timescast, he answers reader questions.
The first one comes to us via Twitter. How are the renewable and fossil fuel lobbying movements trying to hinder the efforts of the nuclear lobby? What we've seen over the last few years is that the nuclear industry has really positioned itself as the good environmental option.
And nuclear power plants don't emit greenhouse gases, so they preserve our environment.
Now that clean option mantra is going to be tested because you have groups like the Sierra Club saying, okay, but in the event of a huge disaster, how bad could it be? Our second question comes from the New York Times website and asks, How come nuclear energy industry advocates never talk about the nuclear waste issue? Another very good question, and one that is not being asked much these days. For a long time, the answer was thought to be Yucca Mountain as a giant disposal site. That idea has now been effectively killed under the Obama administration, and there's now a presidential panel that is studying this problem. But I asked the Energy Department about this just the other day, and the response I got was that it is not seen as an urgent problem. There is no danger in the immediate future, and it's more a problem years down the road, so we will deal with it when we have to deal with it. Our third question also comes via Twitter. Beyond the political staples of lobbying and campaign money, how will the domestic nuclear industry boost its PR? That question comes from the Center for Responsive Politics. Well, we've seen already the nuclear industry going into damage control mode by holding a series of briefings here in Washington for hundreds of congressional staffers and members of Congress themselves. But there will certainly be more questions for them and more intense questions. I have no doubt that we're going to see the industry relying on its many friends in Congress and in the executive branch and the Energy Department and elsewhere to help it make its case that what happened in Japan is not likely or is impossible to happen here, a claim that will obviously be tested by environmental critics.